Side bullies slam her locker. Shut. She opened their jaws with her fists. Maya. Rodriguez had learned to navigate the hallways of Westfield High like a shadow, moving quietly between classes with her head down and her books clutched tightly against her chest. At 17, she was small for her age, barely reaching 5 feet 2 inches, with delicate features and wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slipped down her nose. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore oversized sweaters that seemed to swallow her tiny frame. To everyone at school, she was just another quiet girl who kept to herself, the kind of student teachers barely noticed and other kids forgot existed. What none of them knew was that Maya had been training in mixed martial arts since she was 8 years old. Her father, Miguel Rodriguez, owned a gym in the rougher part of town where he taught real fighting to people who needed it for more than sport. Maya could throw a punch that would drop a grown man and had reflexes faster than anyone suspected. But she had made a promise to her father years ago, after she had gotten into trouble at her old school for breaking a boy's nose when he tried to grab her inappropriately. Never use your skills unless someone's life is in danger, he had told her. The moment you start fighting over small things, you become the predator instead of protecting yourself from them. So Maya endured. She endured the snickers when she walked past groups of popular kids. She endured the way people looked right through her as if she didn't exist. She endured it all because she believed her father was right, that violence should be the last option, not the first. The main source of her daily torment came in the form of 3 girls who had made it their mission to make her life miserable. Brittany Walsh was their leader, a blonde cheerleader with perfectly styled hair and a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. She stood nearly 6 feet tall and used her height to intimidate anyone she considered beneath her. Beside her was always Chloe Martinez, a petite but vicious girl who compensated for her small stature with a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. The third member of their group was Jessica Chen, who followed the other 2 around like a faithful dog, laughing at their jokes and participating in whatever cruelty they decided to inflict that day. Brittany had decided that Maya was the perfect target during the second week of the school year. Maybe it was because Maya never fought back, or maybe it was because she seemed so fragile and alone. Whatever the reason, the 3 girls had turned making Maya's life hell into their favorite pastime. It started small, as these things always do. They would bump into her in the hallways, causing her to drop her books while they walked away laughing. They would sit behind her in classes they shared and make whispered comments about her clothes, her hair, her family's obvious lack of money. In the cafeteria, they would walk past her table and accidentally knock things over, spilling drinks or stepping on her backpack. Maya tried to ignore it all. She would pick up her books without complaint, clean up whatever mess they made, and continue with her day. She told herself it would get better, that they would eventually get bored and move on to someone else. But instead of losing interest, they seemed to feed off her passive responses. The harassment escalated. One Tuesday morning, Maya arrived at her locker to find cruel words scratched into the metal with a key. The next day, someone had stuffed garbage through the vents, and she had to clean out moldy food and crumpled papers before she could get to her books. When she reported it to Mr. Henderson, the vice principal, he just shrugged and said kids would be kids, that she should try to fit in better. Just ignore them, Maya kept telling herself as she cleaned out her locker for the 3rd time that week. They'll get bored. Dad always says that bullies lose interest when they don't get a reaction. But Brittany Walsh wasn't getting bored. If anything, Maya's refusal to respond was making her angrier. During lunch on a Friday afternoon, Brittany decided to make a public spectacle. Maya was sitting alone at her usual table in the corner, quietly eating a sandwich her mother had packed, when Brittany's voice cut through the cafeteria noise. "Hey everyone, look at Maya over there," Brittany announced loudly, standing up from her table in the center of the room. "Isn't it so sad how she sits all alone every day? I mean, I would feel sorry for her if she wasn't so weird." The cafeteria grew quiet as students turned to look. Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she kept her eyes on her sandwich. "Don't react," she told herself. "Don't give them what they want." "I heard her family is so poor they can't even afford to shop at regular stores," Chloe added, her voice carrying across the room. "Look at those clothes. I think my little sister wore that same sweater when she was in middle school." Jessica giggled loudly. "Maybe we should start a charity fund for her, so she can buy some clothes that actually fit, and maybe get some decent food instead of whatever gross stuff she brings from home." Maya's hands clenched into fists under the table, but she didn't move. Around her, she could hear other students starting to whisper and snicker. Some were pulling out their phones, probably recording the humiliation for social media. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, and never come back. But she stayed seated. She finished her sandwich with deliberate slowness, packed up her things, and walked out of the cafeteria with her head held high. Behind her, she could hear Brittany's voice rising again, probably making more comments for the entertainment of their audience. Just a few more hours, Maya told herself as she headed to her next class. Then it's the weekend, and I can forget about all of this for 2 whole days. The weekend provided a brief respite, but Monday morning brought fresh hell. Maya discovered that someone had taken pictures of her from the cafeteria incident and created a cruel meme that was circulating around school. The image showed her sitting alone with text that read, "When even the lunch ladies feel sorry for you." It had been shared dozens of times, and everywhere Maya went she could see students looking at their phones and then looking at her with amused expressions. The harassment continued to escalate throughout the week. Her locker was vandalized again, this time with permanent marker that the janitor couldn't completely remove. Someone threw a wadded-up piece of paper at her head during math class, and when she turned around, half the students were snickering, while the other half pretended not to notice. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was too busy writing equations on the board to see what had happened. On Wednesday, Maya found her gym clothes had been soaked with something that smelled like rotten milk. She had to wear her regular clothes during physical education, earning a lecture from Coach Williams about being prepared and a reduction in her participation grade. That afternoon, Brittany cornered her in the hallway between classes. "You know, Maya," Brittany said, standing close enough that Maya could smell her expensive perfume, "I'm starting to think you actually like this attention. Is that it? Are you so desperate to be noticed that you'll take any kind of attention, even if it's negative?" Maya looked up at the taller girl, her dark eyes steady behind her glasses. "I just want to be left alone," she said quietly. "Left alone?" Brittany laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Honey, you're in high school. Nobody gets left alone. You either learn to play the game or you get played by it. And right now, you're definitely getting played." Chloe appeared at Brittany's shoulder, grinning wickedly. "Maybe she doesn't know how to play the game. Maybe she's too stupid to figure it out. Or maybe," Jessica added, joining the group, "she knows she's too weird and ugly to ever really fit in, so she's given up trying." Maya felt something cold and hard settling in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "Can I please just get to my class?" "See," Brittany said to her friends, as if Maya wasn't standing right there. "She can't even defend herself. It's actually kind of pathetic." Maya walked away without another word, but she could feel their eyes on her back and hear their laughter following her down the hall. In her next class, she sat in the back row and stared out the window, her mind elsewhere. She thought about her father's gym, about the heavy bag where she could work out her frustrations, about the feeling of power and control that came with perfecting a technique. She thought about how easy it would be to show Brittany Walsh exactly what she was capable of, but then she remembered her promise, and she pushed those thoughts away. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. Maya had been looking forward to getting home because her father had promised to teach her a new grappling technique that evening. She was at her locker, carefully organizing her books for the next day, when she heard familiar voices approaching from behind. "Well, well, well," Brittany's voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Look who's still pretending to belong here." Maya didn't turn around. She continued organizing her books, hoping they would just make their comments and move on like they usually did. But today felt different. There was an energy in the air, a tension that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "You know, Maya," Chloe said, stepping closer, "we've been thinking about you, about how sad and pathetic your life must be. I mean, do you even have any friends? Does anyone even care about you?" "Her family probably doesn't even care about her," Jessica added with a cruel laugh. "I bet they're embarrassed to have such a loser for a daughter." Maya's hands stilled on her textbooks. She could feel her heart rate increasing, her breathing becoming more controlled. These were the physical responses her father had taught her to recognize, the signs that her body was preparing for a fight, whether her mind wanted one or not. "You know what I think?" Brittany continued, leaning against the locker next to Maya's. "I think you like being a victim. I think you get off on having people feel sorry for you. It's probably the only attention you've ever gotten in your whole pathetic life." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. "Don't react," she told herself. "Don't give them what they want. Just finish packing up and go home." But Brittany wasn't done. "Actually, I've been wondering something. Are you even a real girl? I mean, you're so flat and shapeless. Maybe you're actually a boy pretending to be a girl. That would explain why you're so weird and why nobody wants to be around you." The comment hit Maya like a physical blow. She had always been self-conscious about her late physical development, about how she looked compared to girls like Brittany, who seemed to have been born with perfect figures and confident attitudes. For a moment, her resolve wavered. "Oh, look," Chloe said mockingly. "I think we hurt her feelings. Are you going to cry, Maya? Are you going to run home to Mommy and Daddy and tell them how mean the other kids are being to you?" Maya turned around slowly, her book still in her hands. She looked at each of the three girls, studying their faces with the same intensity she used when sizing up an opponent in her father's gym. Brittany was smirking, clearly enjoying herself. Chloe looked eager for more drama. Jessica was hanging back slightly, as if she might be starting to feel uncomfortable with how far this was going. "I think," Maya said quietly, "that you should leave me alone now." Brittany laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, Maya? Run away like you always do? Pretend it didn't happen? Face it, you're nothing, you're nobody, and everyone in this school knows it." That's when Brittany made her fatal mistake. She reached out and slammed Maya's locker shut, trapping the sleeve of Maya's sweater in the metal door. The sudden violence of the action, the way the metal crashed together with a sound like a gunshot, triggered something deep in Maya's nervous system. For 17 years, Maya had been the quiet girl, the one who didn't make waves, who absorbed punishment without fighting back. But underneath that gentle exterior was someone who had been trained to fight since childhood, someone whose reflexes were honed to a razor's edge, someone whose father had taught her that there was a time for peace and a time for war. Brittany. Walsh had just declared war. Maya dropped her books. The sound of them hitting the floor seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet hallway. She looked up at Brittany, and for the first time the taller girl saw something in Maya's dark eyes that made her take a step back. "What's wrong with you?" Brittany demanded, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Maya reached up and slowly removed her glasses, folding them carefully and placing them on top of her dropped books. When she looked up again, her eyes seemed different somehow, more focused, more dangerous. "You want to know what I'm going to do about it?" Maya asked, her voice still quiet but carrying a new edge that made several nearby students stop what they were doing and turn to watch. Brittany puffed up, trying to regain her dominance. "Yeah, actually I do. What are you going to do, you little freak?" Maya's response was swift and devastating. She stepped forward, grabbed Brittany by the front of her designer shirt, and in one fluid motion spun her around and slammed her face first against the lockers. The sound of Brittany's body hitting the metal echoed down the hallway like a thunderclap. "Holy shit," someone whispered. Brittany tried to push herself away from the lockers, but Maya's grip was like iron. She pressed the taller girl's face against the cold metal and leaned in close to her ear. "You wanted to know what I was going to do," Maya said, her voice deadly calm. "I'm going to teach you what happens when you push someone too far." Chloe rushed forward, probably thinking she could help her friend, but Maya was ready for her. Without releasing Brittany, she pivoted and caught Chloe with a perfectly executed back fist that connected solidly with the smaller girl's jaw. Chloe's head snapped back, and she stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face in shock and pain. "My jaw!" Chloe screamed. "She broke my jaw!" Jessica turned to run, but Maya's voice stopped her cold. "Don't move," she said without turning around. "We're not done here." The hallway was filling with students now, drawn by the commotion. Maya could hear their excited whispers, the sound of cell phones being pulled out to record what was happening. For a moment, she felt a flicker of concern about the consequences of what she was doing, but then she remembered every day of harassment, every cruel comment, every moment of humiliation, and the concern evaporated. Brittany was struggling against Maya's grip, trying to use her height and weight advantage to break free. But Maya had been grappling with men twice her size since she was 12 years old. She shifted her hold, wrapping her arm around Brittany's throat in a textbook rear-naked choke. "You like making people feel small," Maya whispered in Brittany's ear as the taller girl's struggles grew weaker. "You like making them feel worthless and alone. How does it feel to be powerless for once?" Brittany's face was turning red and her movements were becoming more frantic. Maya could feel the exact moment when panic set in, when Brittany realized that she was completely at the mercy of someone she had considered weak and defenseless. "Please," Brittany gasped, the word barely audible. "Please. I can't breathe." Maya held the choke for a few more seconds, just long enough to make her point, then released it. Brittany collapsed to her knees, gasping and coughing, her perfectly styled hair now a mess, her makeup smeared. But Maya wasn't finished. She grabbed Brittany by the hair and pulled her head back, forcing the taller girl to look up at her. You think I'm nobody? Maya asked, her voice carrying clearly through the hallway that had gone completely silent, except for Brittany's labored breathing. You think I'm nothing? She pulled back her fist and drove it forward in a perfect straight punch that connected squarely with Brittany's nose. There was a wet, cracking sound, and blood began streaming down the cheerleader's face. Brittany screamed, a high-pitched sound of pain and terror that seemed to galvanize Chloe into action. Despite her injured jaw, she rushed forward again, this time swinging wildly at Maya's head. Maya ducked under the clumsy attack and came up with an uppercut that caught Chloe directly under the chin. The smaller girl's teeth clacked together audibly, and she bit down hard on her own tongue. Blood began flowing from her mouth as she staggered backward, her eyes unfocused. Stop! Jessica finally found her voice, tears streaming down her face. Please stop, we're sorry, we're really sorry. Maya turned to look at her, and Jessica flinched, as if she had been struck. Sorry? Maya repeated, her voice flat and emotionless. You're sorry now. Where was this remorse when you were making my life hell? Where was it when you were laughing while your friends humiliated me in front of the entire school? She took a step toward Jessica, who immediately backed up against the wall. You think sorry is enough? You think you can torment someone for months and then just say sorry when the tables turn? I didn't, Jessica stammered, her voice breaking. I just went along with them. I didn't mean... You didn't mean to be a coward, Maya asked, taking another step closer. You didn't mean to stand by and watch while your friends tried to destroy someone's self-worth? You didn't mean to be complicit in everything that happened to me. Jessica was crying openly now, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. Behind Maya, Brittany was still on her knees, holding her broken nose and making small whimpering sounds. Please, Jessica whispered. I know we were wrong. I know we hurt you, but please don't hurt me. I'm not like them. I never wanted to be part of this. Maya studied her for a long moment, seeing the genuine terror in the girl's eyes. She thought about her father's teachings, about the difference between justice and revenge, between protecting yourself and becoming the thing you hate. You're right, Maya said finally. You're not like them. You're worse. At least they had the courage to be cruel openly. You hid behind them, let them do your dirty work while you stayed safe. That makes you a coward and a hypocrite. She raised her fist and Jessica closed her eyes, bracing for the blow, but it never came. Instead, Maya lowered her hand and stepped back. But I'm not like any of you, she said, her voice returning to its usual quiet tone. I don't hit people who can't fight back. I don't torture people for sport. And I don't make people suffer just because I can. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered, her voice carrying clearly through the hallway. Let me make something very clear to everyone here. I am not a victim anymore. I am not someone you can push around, humiliate, or ignore. If anyone else thinks they want to test me, if anyone else thinks they want to make my life difficult, they can step up right now, and we'll settle it. The hallway was completely silent. Students, who had been recording with their phones, had stopped, their hands fallen to their sides. Even the background noise of the school seemed to have faded away. Maya bent down and picked up her glasses, cleaning them carefully before putting them back on. She gathered her books, organizing them neatly against her chest, just as she had every day for months. But something had changed. The way she held herself, the way she moved, even the way other students looked at her, everything was different. Brittany, she said, turning back to the girl who was still kneeling on the floor. Can you hear me? Brittany looked up, her face a mess of blood and tears, her perfect appearance completely destroyed. She nodded frantically, clearly terrified of what might come next. Good, Maya said calmly. I want you to understand something. This is what happens when you push someone too far. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. You thought I was an easy target because I chose not to fight back. You thought my silence meant I couldn't defend myself. You were wrong. She crouched down so she was at eye level with Brittany, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have. You're going to leave me alone now. You're going to leave everyone alone. Because if I hear that you're targeting someone else, if I find out that you're using your little group to make anyone else's life miserable, I will find you. And next time I won't stop until you understand what it feels like to be truly helpless. Brittany nodded again, blood from her nose dripping onto the floor between them. Do you understand me? Maya asked. Yes, Brittany whispered, her voice barely audible. I understand. I won't bother you anymore. I won't bother anyone. Maya stood up and looked around the hallway one more time. Students were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to admiration to fear. She had gone from invisible to unforgettable in the span of 5 minutes. Good, she said simply, then walked away as if nothing had happened. Behind her, Chloe was helping Brittany to her feet, while Jessica stood frozen against the wall, still crying. The crowd began to disperse slowly, students whispering excitedly to each other about what they had just witnessed. News of the fight spread through Westfield High like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that quiet Maya Rodriguez had single-handedly dismantled the school's most notorious group of bullies. The video footage that students had managed to capture went viral on social media, showing Maya's calm demeanor before the fight and her devastating efficiency during it. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Maya was called to the principal's office first thing Friday morning, where she sat across from Principal Roberts, Vice Principal Henderson, and her father, who had been called in for the meeting. "Miss Rodriguez," Principal Roberts began, "I'm sure you understand why you're here. Violence of any kind is not tolerated at this school, regardless of the circumstances." Maya nodded calmly. "I understand. However," the principal continued, "after reviewing the witness statements and the video evidence, it's clear that this incident was the result of months of harassment that went unaddressed by our staff. While we cannot condone your actions, we recognize that you were defending yourself against ongoing bullying." Miguel Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "My daughter has been coming home upset for months," he said, his voice controlled but angry. "She told me about the harassment, but she also told me she wanted to handle it herself, that she didn't want me to get involved. I should have insisted on meeting with you sooner." Vice Principal Henderson looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Rodriguez, if Maya had reported these incidents to us, we would have—" "She did report them," Miguel interrupted. "She told me she spoke to you directly about the vandalism to her locker. Your response was to tell her to try to fit in better." Henderson's face reddened, but he didn't deny the accusation. Principal Roberts cleared his throat. "Moving forward, we're implementing a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and harassment. All 3 of the other students involved in yesterday's incident have been suspended for 2 weeks and will be required to complete counseling and community service before returning to school." "And Maya?" her father asked. "Maya will receive a 1-day suspension for fighting, which is our standard policy. However, given the circumstances, we're scheduling it for a teacher development day, so she won't miss any classes." Maya looked surprised. "That's all?" "Miss Rodriguez," Principal Roberts said with a slight smile, "what you did yesterday was wrong. Violence is never the answer to bullying, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't impressed by how you handled yourself. You showed remarkable restraint in not seriously injuring 3 people who probably deserved worse than they got." When Maya returned to school the following Monday, the change was immediately apparent. Students who had never acknowledged her existence before nodded respectfully as she passed in the hallways. Several people she had never spoken to came up to her to say they were glad she had stood up for herself. Even some of the teachers seemed to regard her with new respect. Brittany Walsh returned to school 2 weeks later with a bandage across her nose and a much quieter demeanor. The doctors had managed to set her broken nose properly, but she would always have a small scar as a reminder of what had happened. She no longer held court in the cafeteria or strutted through the hallways like she owned the place. Instead, she kept her head down and minded her own business. Chloe's jaw had been badly bruised but not broken, though she had trouble eating solid food for several days. She had also become noticeably more reserved, no longer making cutting remarks about other students or laughing at their expense. Jessica seemed to have been affected the most by the incident, even though she hadn't been physically harmed. She had developed a nervous habit of looking over her shoulder whenever she walked through the hallways, as if she expected Maya to appear at any moment. She had also started eating lunch alone, apparently no longer welcome in Brittany's social circle. The most significant change, however, was in the overall atmosphere of the school. The incident had sent a clear message that there were consequences for bullying, that victims might not always remain victims. Several students came forward to report harassment they had been suffering in silence, and the administration was forced to take action in cases they had previously ignored. Maya found herself in an unexpected position. Students who were being bullied began approaching her for advice, seeing her as someone who had successfully stood up to her tormentors. She was uncomfortable with the attention at first, but gradually she began to realize that she could use her new status to help others. One afternoon, about a month after the fight, Maya was approached by a younger student named David Park. He was a freshman, small for his age, and had been getting picked on by some older students. "Maya," he said nervously, "could I talk to you for a minute?" She looked up from her lunch, studying his anxious expression. "What's wrong?" "There are these guys," he began, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. They keep taking my lunch money, and yesterday they shoved me into a locker. I don't know what to do." Maya felt a familiar anger rising in her chest, but it was different this time. Instead of the cold, controlled fury she had felt during her own confrontation, this was a protective instinct, a desire to shield someone else from the pain she had experienced. "Who are they?" she asked. David told her about 3 junior varsity football players who had been targeting him and several other underclassmen. Maya listened carefully, her mind already working on a solution. "Here's what you're going to do," she said finally. "Tomorrow when they approach you, you're going to tell them that Maya Rodriguez is your friend and that she wouldn't be happy to hear about anyone bothering you." David's eyes widened. "You think that will work?" "Trust me," Maya said with a small smile. "It will work." She was right. The next day, David reported that the football players had not only left him alone, but had actually returned the money they had taken from him earlier in the week. Word spread quickly that Maya Rodriguez was protecting the younger students, and incidents of underclassmen being bullied dropped dramatically. Maya had become something she never expected to be, a guardian of the school's social order. She didn't abuse her new power or use it to intimidate people for her own benefit. Instead, she used it to create a safer environment for students who reminded her of her former self. 6 months after the fight, Maya was walking through the hallways when she encountered Brittany Walsh coming out of the guidance counselor's office. They stopped and looked at each other for a moment, the memory of that October afternoon hanging in the air between them. "Maya," Brittany said quietly, Could I talk to you for a minute?" Maya studied her former tormentor's face. Brittany looked different, smaller somehow, less sure of herself. The arrogance and cruelty that had once defined her seemed to have been replaced by something that might have been humility. "What do you want, Brittany?" "I wanted to apologize," Brittany said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because I'm afraid of you, although I am, but because I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm ashamed of it." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I've been seeing the counselor," Brittany explained, gesturing toward the office she had just left, "talking about why I felt the need to hurt other people, trying to figure out why I thought making you miserable would somehow make me feel better about myself." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "The truth is, I was jealous of you. You seemed so sure of yourself, so comfortable with who you were. You didn't need anyone's approval or attention. You just existed, confident and self-contained, and I hated that about you because I could never be like that." Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected revelation. "So, you decided to try to tear me down?" "Yes," Brittany said simply, "and I was wrong. I was cruel and stupid and wrong, and I hurt you badly. I know saying sorry doesn't undo any of that, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did to you was unforgivable." Maya looked at the girl who had made her life hell for months, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Brittany Walsh wasn't a monster or a cartoon villain. She was just a damaged teenager who had tried to build herself up by tearing someone else down. "You're right," Maya said finally. "What you did was unforgivable. You made me dread coming to school. You made me question my worth as a person. You tried to destroy my self-confidence for your own entertainment." Brittany's face crumpled, and for a moment Maya thought she might start crying. "But," Maya continued, "the fact that you understand that now, the fact that you're getting help and trying to change, that means something. It doesn't erase what happened, but it means you might not do it to someone else." "I won't," Brittany said immediately. "I swear to you, I will never treat another person the way I treated you." Maya nodded slowly. "Good, because if you do, you'll have to answer to me again. And next time I might not be so merciful." As the school year drew to a close, Maya reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. She was no longer the invisible girl who crept through the hallways, hoping not to be noticed. She had friends now, people who sought out her company and valued her opinion. Teachers knew her name and called on her in class, recognizing her intelligence and thoughtfulness. More importantly, she had learned something valuable about herself and about the world. Her father had been right that violence should never be the first option, but he had also taught her that there came a time when a person had to stand up and fight for their dignity and self-worth. The key was knowing when that time had come and having the courage to act when it did. Maya Rodriguez had discovered that she was not a victim. She was a warrior who had chosen to be peaceful, and there was a world of difference between the two. The bullies had learned that lesson the hard way, and in doing so they had taught her something precious about her own strength and resilience. The quiet girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true power came not from hurting others, but from protecting yourself and those who couldn't protect themselves. And in a school where bullying had once been an accepted part of the social hierarchy, that transformation had changed everything.